Okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to our second discussion of Genji.
Yeah.
Backwards. There we go.
Yep. We're like 43% of the way through,
Woo!
according to
Wow.
my tracking app. So I feel accomplished.
Yes.
Not
Same.
so small
And
feat.
I was reading the Spark Notes summaries, and it ends after chapter 17 because most English translations end after 17. So I was like, we've finished most English translations easily by now. Like halfway through the last 2 weeks, we finished. So go us.
I have a website I was using. It's not Spark Notes. It's Course Hero. And it looks like it has all the chapters because I've read the summaries through where we are now just to make sure I didn't miss anything important.
Do you have to pay for that?
No.
Okay, I'll check that one up then because I like to read the summaries just so I'm like, okay, in case I miss anything, this helps me understand better. And I was like, Spark Notes, I'm like, wait, you stopped? I need help still.
I'm putting it in the comments in case anyone is wondering.
Thank you. I've been using that one too.
The Course Hero one?
Yeah.
Because I just Googled it. I didn't do Spark Notes. I just Googled it. So, because I listened to some of it while we were on vacation when I was driving, and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything in that section. It was like 4 in the morning.
I feel like with all of these classics, it's good to have something to be like, okay, this is what's actually going on, or like this is the subtext behind it, or context around situations. Because as a modern reader, you're not knowing all that stuff. So it's nice to have that background information, or even that recap information. Because we're covering a lot of pages.
And there's a lot of, a lot of things that can kind of get lost in some of the poetry, some of what they're literally saying. Sometimes you don't always read that because it's like, oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, that's what they're saying. Oh, okay. Less beautiful now.
There's been a couple there's been some really big stuff that I missed. Like, I didn't realize that Genji was considering going to, like, leaving the court again. Like, not his exile, but, like, later he was considering leaving the court. Like, I totally missed that when I was listening to it until I read the summary, and I was like, what? But he stays because of his children. It was like, wow. So he really has changed then in that case.
I missed someone being pregnant, so.
I just remember reading the exile scene where he's like in exile. He's like, I just wish I had someone in my bed. And I'm like, yeah, you haven't changed that much. You haven't grown up that much.
No. He still kind of hasn't at this point. He's a little bit better. But
he's still like really dirty. He's like a dirty old man now instead of a dirty young man.
Well, and he's like, this is my shortcoming. And I'm like, okay, wait to
you should keep working on that one.
Of wanting to sleep with the girl that you brought in as your daughter. I thought he had changed up to that point. I'm like, okay, well, now he's just trying to take care of the wild oats he has sown. So good for him for not leaving these women hanging. He should be good. Until she came.
And even then, when he was exiled, like, it's really great to see that he's like suffering a little because I feel like he kind of deserves it about this.
Yeah.
But then he's like, oh, but there's that beautiful lady who keeps ignoring me, and I'm like, you don't get the message. You're not learning. This is a learning opportunity, and you've missed it.
Anytime a woman is kind of like, I don't know, he's like, you're so rude. It's like,
my heart is broken. Yeah. Like, okay, go talk to one of your other 15 wives, all right? Like, whatever.
Because I couldn't, or I didn't realize that Course Hero was free, I was like looking up on Wikipedia for like character descriptions. Like, this will help me just keep track of everything. And it was like the girl he raped earlier is like now in love with him, and I'm like, I'm sorry. You should not have this kind of relationship. He's such like a Stockholm Syndrome kind of character.
I know.
Like, what's with all these women being, like, abused by him or violated by him, and then they're like, but we still love you. I don't get it. I don't get it.
It's because he's so beautiful and well-spoken.
I know, maybe if there was a visual component, we would understand more. Like, probably if there was a movie about this made recently, they would use it would turn out like who's the guy who plays not Thor, but Thor's the villain?
Oh, Tom Hiddleston or
Oh, Tom
something?
Hiddleston.
Yeah, they would use somebody like him so everybody would fall in love with him, and that would be like really realistic. But we'd
They would be
over
like,
here,
he's just misunderstood.
yeah,
I can fix him.
yeah. And
Are
we
you
would
guys
be over here
okay?
like, mm-mm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I
feel
mean,
like that's my struggle with this. It's just like the lack of translations or lack of adaptions to watch so I can get thoroughly invested in all the characters. Because I am enjoying the reading experience much more as I've gone on. But in getting invested, I normally would be like, okay, let me watch an adaptation so I can like care about these people before I start reading. Because it's such a big book to just come in like and not care about the people at the beginning. And there's nothing like that, at least that I've seen in English that I can like easily accept. Like that is my struggle right now. And keeping people straight, like that's hard too, because if I had faces put to it, that I'm sure it'd be easier.
I agree. It would be. The women felt interchangeable to me, like completely for a long time. I feel like in this section, because it was 20 chapters long, I'm like, I'm getting a handle on who the women are now, but it was rough for a while.
And we spend more than one chapter with a woman at this point, and that helps too. Because the first section, it was a different woman pretty much every single chapter for the most part. And now it's like, okay, we've spent a lot of time with Murasaki and what's the new girl, Tamakazura. We've spent a lot of time with her. I do have to say, okay, the one character growth for Genji is that she refused him and he didn't rape her. So good job, I guess.
True.
The bar is on the floor. Actually, it's in the
like
basement.
a millimeter.
Yeah.
For him, because there's absolutely no, like, he's not going to be punished if he does rape her. I think he knows he can get away with it if he wants to. But at this point, maybe because he's older, maybe he has a little bit more self-control would be my guess. Because I think if he was young still, he wouldn't have developed self-control. But now that he's older and he has like 20 other women that he's taken care of, it's a little easier for him to have self-control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of comments here, but one of the tons is we're not talking about Moby. Tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu.
My trolling husband.
Sorry.
He always finds me. It doesn't matter whose channel I'm on. I don't know how.
So it is such a soap opera of a story. I have not looked up an instrument, but I'm sure it'd be interesting to hear.
I haven't listened to it, but I love that there's illustrations of all the instruments in the book. Also, in case you guys were wondering, I hadn't looked in the back. I know Naomi has the same edition that I have, but there's like layouts of the palace stuff and like a chronology of the entire story.
Yeah.
Nice.
I noticed that this week.
Yeah, I noticed it this week too, and I was like, oh man, this would have been helpful. And it has like offices and titles, so it tells you what they do and why they're doing the things they are, and like listings of people, who they are, like who they're related to, and then every chapter that they appear in. And like it's super helpful. So if you have this edition,
a glossary, which was like, and because what was it? They were like, Murasaki gave her first the color purple, like you see in glossary. I'm like, or whatever it was, something about with glossary. I'm like, okay, I need to go with this glossary and like get into this information. I'm like, oh wow, there's a lot of resources in this edition.
Yeah. And they have clothing and color and the meanings behind those, which is super cool too. It's really interesting. So that's been my favorite part of this reading experience still, is all the historical and cultural stuff that we're learning. Like I loved the fact that here is the girl that Genji is pretending is his daughter, and she's gonna do the, what is it, like the ceremony where now she's a woman and they Tai something. I don't remember exactly what it is. But they're like, okay, well, if we do this ceremony and then she goes into service in the palace, if she is Genji's daughter, she will be offering sacrifices to the wrong ancestors, and so she won't have any blessings because they know that this is a lie. And I'm like, that is fascinating. That's why we have to make sure that we tell the truth now, and this has to come out, because otherwise she's going to be cursed for not offering sacrifices to her actual ancestors. So that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
One thing about his kids that I found really funny, so like there was that comment, or there was like that prophecy that was like he's gonna have 3 children, one of which is gonna be an emperor, one is an empress, and one is like, what was it, a high counselor or something, and that would be like the least a valuable position, but it's still really high. And I was like, the fact that they prophesied he's only having 3 children, this guy is really lucky because he's sleeping with a lot of women.
I know.
How is he only having 3 kids?
His brother-in-law has so many. Tony Chujo or whatever, like, was like his first wife's brother. Like he keeps having all these girls that are like, I'm actually your daughter. And he's like, okay. He's got like over a dozen children. Funny.
I was just like, how is Genji getting away with not having to support all of these children? Because he only has 3.
Yeah. And it's weird, like, and also kind of sad that like Murasaki hasn't had any children of her own, and she's like the beloved wife. It kind of reminds me of like the Leah Rachel situation in Genesis, where it's like the beloved wife is the one who isn't having any children. So
I feel so bad for Murasaki like all the time.
And he thinks it's so cute when she's jealous, and I'm like, this poor girl. And I feel sorry for the new girl too. I said her name once and I keep forgetting it. The one that starts with P. I feel sorry for her.
And when she rebuffs him, he's like, "You hate me."
And then she ends up marrying someone who is like totally like mistreating his actual wife that he already had, where he's like, she's having problems, so she's possessed with a spirit and I'm kicking her out of the house.
Kind of Jane Eyre-ish.
Yeah. Don't look in the attic.
I'm not a big soap opera kind of person. Like typically I'll just enjoy a little bit and then I'll be like, okay, I'm done with all the extras. But it's interesting to look at because of not the soap opera elements, but the culture it's in.
Right.
So like you, Tiffany, I'm like the historical elements, how this plays out in society is more interesting to me than the soap opera elements. But I am getting connected to these characters slowly but surely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's definitely become more enjoyable over time for me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I still don't feel like super invested in the characters still. I wish that I did. I'm like, the reading process has become more enjoyable for me. But it's like all of them could die in a blaze of glory right now, and I would be like, okay,
yay,
move
we're
on.
done.
Like, I mean, I'm not like, I wouldn't cry if anything happened, even to like the women at this point. Like, I would feel sorry for them. I already do feel sorry for them, but I'm not like, I'm not emotionally invested at all. And I wish that I was. So maybe I'll get there. But I do find it still interesting. So
yeah, I'm at like, it's maybe a 3-star, maybe. But I do like that the tone has darkened considerably. Like, there's a lot more of like, what Genji is doing is wrong. Like, it did, people said that, the author said that when he kidnapped Murasaki. I get that, but as what he's doing with his daughter right now is like that's been very like, it's been made very clear how wrong that is. And I just feel like as he gets older, people are like turning on him. Like everybody's like, oh, he's still got that flaw and he's still pursuing women. Like everybody knows, like the serving women know, like everybody knows. So I like that about it. And I read a review by one of my friends who said the beginning got old really fast and she wasn't enjoying it. But then the second half, it's like basically an expose of all the problems that Japanese women had living in court. And, these women are pretty privileged that we're reading about. Like, as far as women goes. Imagine just like the serving women and people who don't even have that protection, and it gets even darker when you think of it like that. So I do appreciate the book on that level, that it's really showing how difficult life would have been to be a woman at this time in Japan.
Yeah, I think Anna Marie was saying that like the book sounds like it's over dramatized, like it's even amplifying, which feels kind of like satirical, right? I don't know that this is supposed to be funny, but it does feel like it's taking what was there and like amplifying it to a really high level. I mean, maybe this is just how it was normally. I don't know. I guess I don't know, but that's what it feels like. So
I feel like to write something about this serious of a topic, which is kind of based on your culture, you can't be like actual literal truth. Because at least, okay, so putting myself in that society where you're a woman, you're in a situation where your life is really not valuable as like your own individual person, and you don't have any protection from anyone except for like a father or a husband, then, or like a family head. What are you supposed to do in that environment? And if you're writing a book about this environment, and it's like, if you were to go so hard, like so close to the truth, it would be probably like a career ending, exile ending, or situation like that's the worst. Just because of people probably wanting to shut you up if they feel like uncomfortable with it, like the emperor or these people who are in power. So I feel like you'd have to like over exaggerate just for the sake of being like, we're showing a reality, but we're not too close to the truth, or people can't laugh at it, or people can't be like, oh, I'm a little ridiculous, so I'm not like that. Kind of like that satire aspect of it. Because like Murasaki writing in this time period must have been kind of tumultuous for if she had been going too close to the truth. Like if she'd been like being like, well, this is what the emperor did last week, so I'll just write that. Like that might have been a little problematic, and
that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And I think too, some of the things that we are reading and we're like, oh my gosh, we're probably also kind of normal. Like the way that like the people that are in the court have like all these different wives and stuff, like that was normal for like the aristocracy and stuff, not so much for poorer people. I think we talked about that last time. But some of this stuff that we're like, oh my gosh, it's like we're so far removed from this, not only in terms of like how many hundreds of years have passed, but also like totally different background and like culture of like country and stuff too. So there's a lot of aspects that are shocking to us that may not have been.
I think rulers have always been kind of like that. Like no matter where you look, they've always had way too many. Because it's like if you have enough money, that's what you would do. Which is why monogamy has been like such a big revolution in general, because people, instead of putting their money into having more wives, they're instead, putting money into their houses or their businesses. And so society can grow. Like in general, society can grow if you're not like, with all of my extra money, I'm going to buy a third wife and a fourth wife. So it is interesting, but rulers have always had enough money to just do that, to support multiple women and stuff like that. So.
Well, and it's that whole like power corrupting people too, on top of that.
It's people who do not have any check marks that, or anyone they have to go by to approve something, right? Like any king, like it was expected, at least in Europe, that you're gonna have a mistress or two, or five, like just because that's what kings did. You were married, but you also had a bunch of mistresses along the way, and so it was one wife, but it was also not faithful. So that expectation where it's like, oh, I'm in charge, I don't have to listen to anybody, can go to people's heads.
Absolutely.
And they weren't always marrying for love either. So, of course, when they have a feeling, they're going to pursue that feeling because there's no, like you said, there's nothing to check them.
Right. Definitely. I do like Genji's son more. Like when we talked about, not the one that's the emperor, but the other one, the one that he actually had with his first wife, and kind of like the relationship that he has with I think it's Tono Chuju's daughter. But like he's not like his dad. He's like, I really, really love this one girl, and I am devastated that you won't let me be with this girl. And he's not even pursuing other girls, I don't think. I mean, the Emperor one is, but like that's also, again, expected for the Emperor, because Genji's dad was like that. That's why Genji exists. It's because his dad was like that.
I feel like too, it seems like all the men in the book are like the same in their proclivities with women. There's not like, oh, this is a great man. I mean, Genji's son is probably the mildest of all of the male characters, in that he actually sticks with, if he has feelings for a woman, he like sticks with her for the most part, even though he's now in love with his mother-in-law. Mother-in-law? Is that? I don't know. Murasaki is not his mother, but
right.
Yeah,
like stepmother,
his father's
or yeah.
I didn't realize that had traversed into the love territory. I just thought he thought she was pretty. Yeah. But I guess like father, like son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit icky. I did not realize though that like men were not allowed to look at women. Like that took me a long time into this novel to realize, they just never see the women. Like, did my son catch a glimpse?
Yeah.
That is, I mean, I knew the script, but like it's not like they ever have like a party where everybody gets together, and it's like, no, they just don't, they never see it. That is wild to me.
Well, that's why I think we talked about this last time. Yeah. We talked about this last time where Genji was sleeping with some girl and he like didn't even know what she looked like. He was like, she sounds hot.
Yeah.
She writes good poetry. She must be nice.
But like the kids seem like they can be around each other without screens.
Yeah, there's a certain age where you get cut off and you can't anymore, which is why Genji could see his stepmother for a certain point. And then once he got to be like, I don't know, 10 or 12, they're like, nope, this is over now. You're an adult now. Like, you can't see her anymore. So,
yeah.
I think it's interesting as well about like how valuable daughters are in this culture.
Yes.
They carry them off. But typically cultures are like, boys are better, at least like in those cultures, like ancient cultures. But it's interesting that they're like, this guy was like, I want more daughters. I don't have any daughters. And it's like, daughters are valuable. Yes, they're not like independent, but they're valuable as like a political resource. So they're wanted, even though they might not be treated well or given any power in any way.
Because that's not typically what you see in any like older society. It's usually like, even though the women are the ones bearing the children, this is more not just like, oh well, the son carries on the family name, so we want sons. I thought that was interesting too, because Genji's so sad that he only has one daughter. So it's like, well,
and the guy who's lost all his daughters is like, where are they?
Yeah. I love what Anne Marie said too.
Here, Christy, or last week?
What was that?
Did you have any thoughts from last time, since you weren't here, that you wanted to share from the first section?
Let me look at my notes. It's been long enough now that let me look at my notes. You were gonna say something about Anne Marie's comments, Tiffany.
Yeah, I like how she was talking about how nature is so involved, and they are very connected to nature. It's not even just in all their poetry, but like they're always out in nature, and there's a lot of emphasis on that. So there are moments that are like really beautiful because of that.
I think my favorite illustration in this edition so far is the women playing with like making snow forts or something, like playing in the snow. That was I think my favorite illustration.
Yeah.
It's just like, this is so cool to see, just like this kind of picture of life that you don't normally get to see things. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the mundane that is just so cool.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I did not even imagine that, like in my imagination. Last week it was what?
Someone wants to be here too.
Yes. Last week it was Sandro. This week it's Dexter.
He has things he wants to say. He's got thoughts.
Yes, so okay. I compared this, Naomi, you might appreciate this as a true crime listener. I feel like women who fall in love with Genji after reading this, or mostly those women who fall in love with Genji after reading this, it reminds me of women who fall in love with like rapists and murderers who are imprisoned and then write letters to them while they're in prison, the rapist or murderer. They fall in love with him because, I don't know, he's handsome or they think he's misunderstood. It reminds me so much of that true crime element. They just think, oh, I wouldn't be the one that he would murder. You know, I would actually be the one that he's in love with.
I can change him.
Yeah. So there was that. What? Sorry, were you saying something?
No, I agree. That's something that I think is relatable for his character type. Because I mean, I'm one of the people who are seeing Genji. I'm like, wow, this guy needs a reality check, and like that's all I'm at. But some people are like, oh, poor Genji, he just is struggling so much, and I'm like, stop enabling. That's where I'm at. So I totally see that. Like that could be where someone who loves Genji as a character would be someone who'd be more drawn to like forgiving, even though there's no repentance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even though he could just keep doing what he's doing, like, and does.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also, he reminds me a lot of Hugh Hefner. That was another comparison I was making. It's just this is just the Japanese Hugh Hefner, basically. And then also, this section. Okay, this is from this section though. The section with the Hitachi princess who was like waiting for him all those years, and slowly people were leaving her and everything, but then he comes back to her and like starts taking care of her. That to me was like one of my favorite things that happened in the story. I thought that was actually really touching that he rewarded her faithfulness in that way. I feel like faithfulness is that's like the one loyalty. That's the one thing that keeps that's like the one moral that I feel like the story keeps coming back to is loyalty. So I think that was a really beautiful picture of loyalty, I thought.
And I do think that, like, and I know the story's actually said this, but we do actually see that Genji is very loyal to the women that he slept with. Like, he's like, okay, they have no recourse to take care of themselves financially. Like, I am going to take care of them. And that is something I appreciate about him. I just don't know why he's got to, that's not enough, I guess. I don't understand that.
Faithful. Normally those words are like tied together, but this is the opposite.
Right.
Yeah. It's just upsetting that he keeps, like, he promised Murasaki that things would be different when she was older, and I guess they are somewhat different. Like, he does spend a lot of time with her, but he'll still go out and, like, when she's expecting him, spend the night with someone else. And he'll be, like, acting like he didn't do anything wrong, and, like, he doesn't understand why she's upset, and it's like, I don't know. I want Murasaki to be happy, so in that sense, I'm, like, rooting for them, which I know that's something that video you guys were talking about last week a lot. Last time a lot. I see why people are rooting for Murasaki, but yeah, I don't think that anything great could come out of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, she really, not that any of these women really have that much of a choice, but it feels like she had the least choice because she was like kidnapped when she was like 10 years old and literally groomed to be his wife. So
yeah,
it makes me feel even more sorry for her than all these other women.
And I feel like she's kind of stuck in this situation where she can't get out. Like there was no recourse ever from the time she was 10 on.
Mm-hmm.
But even worse than that, like she's just so, I feel like, brainwashed to be like this perfect woman for him because that's what he's groomed her to be. And then he treats her like a possession. She's just there, like, look at this perfect little wife, and then I can go off and it's like, oh, it's so cute when she's jealous, but doesn't like, but it's okay. Like, but then when she's jealous, he's upset because, oh, that's not fitting the perfect wife situation. So she created a perfect wife, and then when she's become a human and not a possession anymore, like when she's having those reactions, he doesn't like it because he doesn't know how to handle when she's not a thing to have or thing to own.
Yeah.
Yes. There was somewhere in there, I remember reading that, he raised her to think that jealousy was like wrong and that was a fault. I was like,
yeah.
Which shows that he planned on cheating on her after they got married.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he was just lying to her when he said, oh, things are going to be different when you're older. Because I didn't realize too that he was never going to actually marry her and make her like the main wife, so to speak, because her background, like, she has no connections. Like, when he was raising her, I was under the illusion that she was going to be like his main wife and things might change from there on because of her, but not how it happened.
I think she is still the favorite wife. I think she's in the most prestigious place, even though she doesn't have the most prestigious background. He's actually talked about how she's doing well status-wise now because of him, but if something were to happen to him, he's worried about what would happen to her because she doesn't have anything on her own. I think she would be more prestigious of a wife if she had been able to give him a child. Then there would be some sort of like someone to take care of her afterwards and someone who might be able to rise in the courts because of Genji's background and then be able to help her. But
yeah. And then stealing his other concubine's daughter and giving her to Murasaki.
I felt sorry for that mother because the mother also understood I can't give her anything here at all. She has no chance here. So I know why the mother did it, but I felt so sorry for her. She's weeping, saying goodbye to her daughter, and her daughter's like, get in the carriage with me. Come on, let's go. And I'm like, oh, this is sad.
It's horrible. Oh.
It's like he doesn't even care about these women in like a romantic, like care how they feel in a sense. They are literally just possessions to him. So his wife who has a child that, his one wife that doesn't have a child, his one wife that does have a child, he's like, you know what? I'll just replant this child over here. Who cares how this mother feels? Who cares how Murasaki feels that she's raising someone else's child? Maybe she doesn't want to raise someone else's child. Maybe she does. We don't know. But she's just given this child.
She doesn't even know it's coming.
And
there you go.
It's literally just these are objects to be moved for his liking.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's definitely not a hero in my book.
No.
No. Because for some people he is, and I do not see it.
I don't understand people who like him as a character. I don't. Because it's not enough growth for me to actually like him. I don't. But I'm trying to see him as a vehicle to explore this time period in Japan. And that's how I'm getting through it.
Yeah.
We're gaslighting ourselves into thinking, oh, there's some worth here.
Such a good workup literature.
Yeah.
I am enjoying aspects of it, but I'm not a huge poetry person either. So the beautiful poetry, I'm like, okay, I can recognize that this is good poetry, but like, I'm not someone who commonly reads poetry. So even that is not is not what it could be for me. A lot of people, that's the part that they love the most. So
yeah.
I feel like this is reminding me a lot of Vanity Fair. Have either of you read Vanity Fair?
I haven't.
Yeah, and that book felt like it was too long for what it was too.
Because Vanity Fair is all about the villain and how she impacts everyone around her. Because Becky Sharp is by no way a hero.
No.
I mean, I respect her for getting through life being very poor and very, like, all these factors. But she's by no way a hero. And this book is very much the same, where it's like Genji and how he impacts the women, whereas Becky Sharp, how she impacts all the men around her.
And when Becky Sharp,
novel,
yeah, when Becky starts reaping some of the consequences of her behavior, you're not like, oh, poor Becky. You're like, finally, maybe she'll learn something.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, I've been seeing a few relation things like that to like other like Victorian works where I'm like, a picture of Dorian Gray, entirely useful and forever loved, and I'm like, that doesn't end so well for him. But
and he's so pretty. He's so pretty. Genji is too.
That reminds me. When I was talking earlier about the true crime aspect, I feel like a lot of people have a problem with true crime for kind of elevating these criminals and like focusing more on them. So a lot of modern true crime is focusing more on the victims and their lives. But this book is not modern in any sense. I feel like it's focusing on like the victimizer, even though we are getting more time with the victims now. It's really elevating the victimizer, which is the problem that I have with it. It doesn't really feel like an anti-hero novel because it keeps praising him.
Yeah,
he doesn't.
Yeah, the narrator herself keeps like breaking out to say, and I think he's great, basically.
Yes.
Like, there are times where she breaks the fourth wall to say those kinds of things. So it's not just all the people around him. Even the narrator is kind of like unbiased in her view of him, it seems. There are certain moments that he's condemned, certain things that you're like, okay, that like where everyone's like, that's not a good idea. But overall, everyone's like, well, boys will be boys, and he's really cute. So it's
yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a level there that I don't appreciate either. I kind of am like, well, maybe it's just like tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it does feel like it's kind of supporting. It's a different world entirely.
Exactly, and that's what I have to keep reminding myself too, to be like, okay, well, in comparison to what other men were doing in this world, maybe what Genji is doing in terms of actually taking care of the women that he beds, a lot of the other men aren't doing that in this story.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
This is an interesting thing because sometimes I wonder why classics are classics. Like, why did they stick around? I feel like this is kind of like English Canterbury Tales. Like,
I can see that. Yeah,
like a cultural society thing.
Yeah. And the fact that it was written by a woman and it's lasted this long is another reason probably why it's still touted and being held on to. But I mean, it probably is a really good picture of court life in this time, which is something that we don't know that much about in America anyway. I mean, I'm sure Japanese people probably know more about it because they've learned about it in school and stuff, but not Western countries so much.
In the first novel,
the world is so far away. You're like, it's a look into something. So I feel like that's why it's not big here in Western culture, but probably in Japanese, like that's why it's stuck around because it's like our Canterbury Tales, which is around the same era of being written.
Right.
I feel like it has historical significance, but like as a work of art, I have such major issues with it.
Yeah. Isn't it supposed to be like the world's first novel too or something?
Yeah. I think that's probably another reason. There are other works like that that are like of historical significance, but you're kind of like I haven't actually read all of Uncle Tom's Cabin, but I've heard people describe that as like a work of historical importance. But like if you want to read a work, you should probably find like a work by a Black author if you're like interested in learning about that subject, what life was like for slaves. Like read something by a Black author versus Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is important historically. But now we have different ideas of what makes a work of art important.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's just like how, like even in Jane Austen's era, like things didn't survive into the Victorian era, and then things in the Victorian era, some things were successful, some things didn't survive into the Georgian era, like or the Edwardian era. So it was like we all have books like right now that are being written that are going to be considered classics in like 50 years. And many books will not be considered classics. Many books will just go away and just be like a part of this time and day, this time and reading experience, but they won't last forever, whereas some books will carry on. And something about these books, whether they just keep being talked about because they're an important historical significance, a great story, well written, or if they're really terrible, I feel like sometimes those books pass along too because they're just so bad. And I don't think that's this one, but I'm just saying I think sometimes books are being like, oh, it's so terrible. Like, okay, you guys like Twilight. I get it. I'm not gonna back on that. But I think I'm like Twilight's probably gonna be one that you're gonna talk about for next 50 years because people are gonna say, look at this vampire story, look how it's written. But also it's so easy to read. Like you know what I mean?
It reinvigorated kind of like the vampire genre. And exactly. Harry Potter did the same thing. Book, you know? Harry Potter revolutionized like middle grade literature at the time. So
like these are going to be classics, I think, going forward, even though they might not be for all the same reasons.
I guess there's, you know, some penny dreadfuls that have stood the test of time because of how like campy they were for their time period. And so of course we're going to have our camp classics as well.
Exactly. That's my point.
I love how all our minds were like, Twilight's going to be a classic in the future.
It probably will be, unfortunately.
I feel kind of bad for the future. Like, they're going to be like, why?
What was wrong with those people?
Okay, but
this is coming from someone who loves Twilight.
It's going to be like Jane Austen. Like, when we read back and be like, wow, Jane Austen's so great. What were those other writers doing? That's going to be the Twilight comparison. Anne Radcliffe, what were you thinking? We'll still read it.
I love Anne Radcliffe, though. Well, the one I've read.
I was actually thinking we should read one of those for next year because I was like, I have never read an Anne Radcliffe, and she has some pretty big ones.
I loved Mysteries of Udolpho. It was like my favorite book of the year when I read it like 2 years ago. I loved it. But I haven't read anything else by her, so.
It's a discussion maybe maybe we'll talk about in 4 weeks at our like number 4 live show so we can like all talk about it and figure out what we kind of want to read.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah, I had some other thoughts like what was it, Belinda or Evelina? Those are kind of bigger.
Yeah,
that
Belinda
kind of
was so good.
Oh, I would read Belinda in a heartbeat.
Yes,
so
please. Yeah, Evelina, I do not recommend. Belinda, I recommend wholeheartedly.
So those are some thoughts I had floating around for next year. But we can maybe everyone can think about that. If you have any ideas, let us know, whether it be in this live show if you're here or comments, and we can start planning for what we want to read next year. So yeah. I don't have much else to think about like with this section. I feel like we've talked about a lot of my thought points about going into this. You guys have anything else like that you feel like we want to talk about? Or anyone else who's here? Anna Marie?
I'm going to be so curious to hear what Victoria is thinking because I think she was the one who was enjoying it the most at the first live show. So I'm really curious if she's still enjoying it just as much as she was. So I'm
Me too. I feel like, yeah, we need her to balance us out because we're all like hating on it. We need you, Victoria.
I think we appreciate some things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some things are a bit more of a struggle, but yeah. Well, not every book can be a 100% love, so.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the next section is a shorter section, at least, for everyone.
Yay.
We made it through. And I was traveling for a lot of this, so I was so happy I made it through. I finished the last chapter yesterday. I'm like, oh, I feel better. I wasn't sure I was going to make it.
Oh, man. Yeah, I think this one's like 230 pages in our edition, so I don't know how long that is in audiobook form, but not too long compared to the last one.
Yes.
Yep. Well, if we're all talked out,
I
don't have any other thoughts. So we'll be back in 2 weeks. I'll be camping, so hopefully we have some good Wi-Fi. We'll see how that works out. So if next time is struggle, just bear with me because I'm the one who's connecting to the Wi-Fi here. So yeah, we'll see how it goes next 2 weeks. But good luck reading, everyone, and we'll hopefully finish off well.
Yes. Thanks, Naomi.
Bye.